Hey everybody, before we get started, just reminding this episode brought to our patrons like Adam DeHarp, Architect 10, Baxter G, Carlos, Dragon, Ferris, Jeremy Vasquez, Just the Fae, Jonathan Sandoval, Legendary Boss Hunter, Regent Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvar, Sean Pryor, some guy named Bob, 723, and Varian the Crow, and viewers like you. If you like what we do want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon to get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies. It really helps us out. Thank you for your support, everybody. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Take FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Today we should be looking at our latest Engi servant, the new limited SSR Avenger, Taira no Kagekiyo. And as always on Wanted, if this is your first time, we'll be taking a crack at a character's real-life history and folklore, their lore and fate. I use capital L's because people like that on the internet. Talk about their mechanics and more, such as frequency of rate-ups and other fun stuff. There's also some probable mild spoilers for Lost Belt 5.5. If you haven't cleared that yet, you should work on that. Gotta catch up on some stuff, okay, guys? Also, gonna end my intro by saying off the top for once, to maybe like this video and share it with your friends. YouTube seems to like these medium-length videos, you know, the 20 to 30 minutes range, even less these days, so we'd appreciate you guys showing your support if you're out here, getting that good luck charm. Consider firing off to us with some stuff. Alright, let's get into the business. Alright, so if you are a Chad FGO enjoyer, you probably know a little bit about the Genpei War. It comes up a lot, but it's very important to this story, so we'll give you the short version. The Genpei War was a civil war in Japan. It happened from about 1180 to 1185. It involved two major factions, the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan. It began basically when the Taira performed a coup to take control of the government. They banished all their political rivals from the government, you know, exiled them all. And this caused all of those rivals to kind of gather together and take up arms under the banner of the Minamoto clan. And the war ends, as you may know, with Minamoto no Yoritomo becoming the shogun and establishing the Kamakura shogunate. So it really didn't work out for the Taira. Now, as you can tell from the name, Taira no Kagekiyo, which you could render this as Kagekiyo of the Taira, was a samurai on the Taira side during the war. Now, Kagekiyo was the son of Fujiwara no Tadakiyo, a high-ranking Taira retainer, who, after the coup, was appointed the assistant governor of the Kazusa province, among some other titles. So, as you can tell by the name, Kagekiyo was eventually, at some point, formally adopted by the Taira clan. But he does seem to have kept the association with Kazusa at some points, styling himself as Akushichibyo Kagekiyo of Kazusa, or was styled that way by later historical anecdotes and other stuff. We'll get into that in a little. Now, from a pure historical standpoint, not too much is attributed to Kagekiyo. He was a general during the Genpei War, was considered a valiant and strong warrior. In a story related in the Heike Monogatari, which is a epic retelling of the Genpei War penned many years later, usually placed sometime just before the 1300s is when some of our first commentaries and acknowledgments it was out happened, so way later. But in this anecdote, it was said that at the Battle of Yashima, Kagekiyo was said to have laid hands on the Minamoto samurai named Miyonoya no Juro and grabbed his neck guard in order to prevent him from escaping, so grabbing the neck of his armor. And Kagekiyo's grip strength was said to be so strong that while Miyonoya did escape, he did so by basically forcing Kagekiyo to tear off that piece of armor. So, you know, embellished almost assuredly, but even a couple hundred years later, they thought, this guy was pretty tough. There are also anecdotes from multiple sources while I was doing my research, lots of little footnotes in encyclopedias and other historical texts that Kagekiyo tried, obviously unsuccessfully, to have Yoritomo assassinated a few times. So, when the Taira were ultimately defeated at Den-no-ura in 1185, Kagekiyo was captured, and according to historical records, eventually starved himself to death in captivity in 1196 in Kamakura. So, while he was, captured when the war was ended, he was taken as a political prisoner, as a hostage for quite a while before just ultimately, letting himself go. That said, something seems to have captured the public consciousness about Kagekiyo here. He remained a popular figure in the arts. There are a lot of visual arts and woodblocks of, those moments from the Heike and other stories about him. And also in a lot of performing arts. Shows up as a character in many forms of traditional drama. Multiple references to kabuki plays and other art forms, theater, that kind of stuff, where Kagekiyo is almost like this archetypal character. There are stories of him, breaking free from captivity to attempt to assassinate Yoritomo, or, when he's captured, plucking out his own eyes so he cannot see his enemy's victory, stuff like that. Now, this popularity occurred way after Kagekiyo's death. It seems to have started around the 14th century and continued through the modern day. Kagekiyo is so popular to have been seen in various modern works, including several video games, including, this will be relevant later, an obscure Namco game called Genpei Tomaden, where Ghost Kagekiyo comes back as a hack-and-slash protagonist, and Yoritomo is the final boss. Didn't know anything about that, but put a pin in that one. Now, despite all this mystique and mystery, Kagekiyo wasn't traditionally on any of these lists called the Heike no Ochido, fugitives from the Genpei War, which were lists of alleged Taira samurai who were said to have escaped and fled to the far provinces of Japan. So even when we're embellishing, when we're fictionalizing, it is generally accepted that Kagekiyo was captured and died in captivity sometime later. It's just that, like I said, fictional authors, dramatists like to spice it up a little bit. Now, some of this seems to be due to the title that was attributed to him in the Heike, the Akushichi Byoe. You could translate that as something like Bad Guy of the Seventh Guard or Seventh Degree Bad Dude. So, yeah, it's a heck of a title. Now, this title seems to have originated and been attributed to Kagekiyo for suspicion in relation to the death of his uncle, who was related to some of the stuff going on with him being held hostage, taken as a political prisoner, but modern historians, from what I've seen, think that Kagekiyo was uninvolved in that death. It's just a weird nickname that seems to have cropped up in stuff like the Heike Monogatari and later. It's still a heck of a title. Either way, the title and the general vibes of this guy have contributed to a long-term pop culture impression of Kagekiyo as a strong but a bit of a dark warrior, a bad boy with attitude, a real villain, a vigilante man, a cool guy who looks like a weird nerd. Seriously, look up the cover art for Genpei Tomaden, or look in the bottom corner of the video in like 5 seconds. Well, more like 5 minutes, but you know what I mean. So as usual, fate makes all of this so much weirder. So the physical form of Kagekiyo, the body we see in FGO, is the body of Minamoto no Yoshitsune, who we might know better as the character Ushi Wakamaru. So the aforementioned Yoritomo, the future shogun, is Yoshitsune's brother, and while Yoshitsune was very clearly a valuable warrior and commander during the Genpei War, accredited with major victories at Yashima, Dainoura, stuff like that, Yoritomo was kind of paranoid. He grew a little suspicious of Yoshitsune's growing success and power. First, he denied Yoshitsune several titles granted to them by the cloistered emperor, and eventually was responsible for chasing Yoshitsune out of Kyoto in 1185, and then pressuring those people who were sheltering Yoshitsune after that into betraying him in 1189, which led to Yoshitsune's seppuku. It's also kind of fitting, to while we're technically in the lore, so we can talk about some real-life stuff, that like Kagekiyo, Yoshitsune has their own fair share of weird mythology around their death. There are some accounts by Ainu historians, apparently, it's what I'm told anyway, that claim that he escaped and fled to Hokkaido and changed his name. There is another story that claims Yoshitsune fled to the mainland and became Genghis Khan, a story which was completely made up by a Japanese writer in the 1800s, but the fact that he felt like making that up tells you some things. There's also the ambiguous fate of Yoshitsune's mistress Shizuka Gozen and their unborn son, whose exact whereabouts aren't confirmed. FGO. There's a lot of world building you can do here. Give me some more juice. Anyway, that explanation is there to explain why Kagekiyo has Yoshitsune's body, because the servant, who is named Taira no Kagekiyo, is less of a person and more of a personification, a persona, if you will, of all the grudges and regrets of the dead Taira, who are specifically mad at Yoritomo, generally mad at the Genji, but specifically mad at Yoritomo. This is how Yoshitsune can be Kagekiyo or be a Kagekiyo, because obviously Yoshitsune is a mite annoyed at her brother for betraying her trust and having her executed because Yoritomo was scared that people thought Yoshitsune was cooler. They did. There's a lot more mythologizing and drama about Yoshitsune as, a brave young warrior who was tragically cut short. Now, as established earlier with that discussion of the Genpei Tomaden, which, by the way, was referenced in an old Guda Guda joke, and lots of other ghost stories that are like this, the idea of the Taira being so 200% mad as to come back and try and get Yoritomo isn't really that new. There were already historical, Japanese stories along that vein that the angry ghosts from the war try and get back at the Genji. So, them turning that into a servant with a name that's, very popular in classical Japanese art form, not that weird. Pretty common. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't pick up on as a foreigner unless you were really deep into, like Japanese historical arts, but the kind of thing that probably to certain members of the audience will make them go, oh yeah, it's kind of like that thing. Or it's just like Nasu played Genpei Tomoden once as a kid and he really liked it. Anyway, if the original Taira no Kagekiyo existed, they are not necessarily the one who is recorded as this heroic spirit. The Kagekiyo who is a servant is basically a conceptual weapon against Yoritomo and against the entire Minamoto clan, which, by the way, if you're wondering, the way Minamoto is phrased, it has an alternate reading phonetically as Genji, hence the litany, Genji must die. Anyone who bears ill will to the Genji may wear the mask of Kagekiyo and become their role. Yes, I will continue making kabuki analogies. So, this means that Kagekiyo is an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. Or, to put it another way, even if you kill a Kagekiyo, somebody, at some point, will be mad at the Genji and become a new vessel for Kagekiyo. According to FGO, there were 37 vessels for Kagekiyo which tried to attack Yoritomo. I don't really know where they got this number. That's just what they say in the profile. This also plays into some mechanics later, so keep that in mind. Now, because the Genji or Minamoto clan were so influential, this hatred and conceptual power works kind of up and down the timeline, even though Kagekiyo is from the era of the Genpei War. It works just as well on future members of the clan and past members as well, such as Raiko and her followers, Minamoto no Raiko. Get it? Now, in major story events, Kagekiyo appears as an adversary in Lost Belt 5.5 Heiankyo as one of the demon generals summoned by Ashiya Domon, writing at Tsuchigumo. This doesn't work. Shocking, I know. And Kagekiyo will return as a character in the upcoming Little Big Tengu event, which is why we are doing this video, because that is where their debut banner is. They were kind of, an NPC version, and got spiced up a little bit. We'll talk about that in mechanics. So, there you go. There is your story and lore dump, and we will now move on to the aforementioned mechanical section. Alright, so to reiterate, Kagekiyo is the new SSR Avenger. She has the lowest attack for this slot and the second highest HP, tied with Dante's. In general, though, Avengers tend to have pretty low HP and pretty high attack, so there's still decent numbers in there. She is quick arts buster with low hit counts on those arts, so her NP gain is quite high, even though the hit counts on her quick are good. It's 4. So you see some kind of min-maxing there a little bit. Her NP is fairly straightforward. I say that, though, it's got some extra spice. But the basic concept is it's a single target quick. It strips enemy buffs first, so they are buff stripped completely first. This, by the way, was defensive only, I believe, in the NPC version, so now it's even better. And then it also inflicts them with Cursed based on overcharge, so starts at 1k for 5 turns, and then can get as high as 5k for 5 turns if you go all the way to 500% overcharge. Not the hardest to do in this day and age. But also, it deals bonus damage based on stacks of a grudge buff. I'll explain that later, it's skill-related. But basically, the extra damage caps at 4 stacks for plus 100% damage. It's plus 25% damage for a stack. So you basically get to amp up her damage significantly if you have this bonus buff. Also, it is a quick single target with 10 hits, so keep that in mind. Chase that overkill. Now, our first skill here is the aptly named Genji Must Die. It gives you 100% to 200% special attack versus Genji enemies, so damage bonus versus Genji. It's quite a lot. It's pretty big. It also gives her 50 to 100% critical damage up for 3 turns also. Again, fairly big. For 3 turns, decent. It is also a 20 to 30% battery, and it tanks the star absorption of all allies for 3 turns. It's minus 100%, so unless they have other star absorb buffs to cancel that out, nobody getting stars with Kagekiyo. So, there's a lot of damage. Second skill is a stackable guts, our favorite new mechanic. Not really that new, but relatively new. So, the guts is 1 time 3 turns, 3k HP. It also gives her a 3-turn, 50 to 100% instant kill resist, so you are less likely to get dobbed out by instant death. And then also gives you 3 turns of a buff, which triggers when Guts is activated. This applies a stack of her Grudge or Vengeance buff, which lasts for 10 turns. All of this on a potentially as low as 4-turn cooldown, which quite frankly is ludicrous for a Guts. She gets a one-time 3,000, HP Guts every 4 turns? Spiced. Not to mention you can get a stack that lasts 10 turns on there. So if you're getting your NP back, you can make that damage last and even stack up a little bit pretty decently. Final skill, also pretty good. It's a 2 hits, 3 turns evade. It also gives her 3 turns of attack up, 20 to 30%, so general, generic damage increase. and also slaps all enemies with a very basic 500 curse damage per turn for 3 turns. Not really necessary. I suspect this was more important when she was an NPC for weird NPC stuff. This just kind of factors into some of the stuff we're going to talk about later with like team comps. Passives are incredibly straightforward. You've got the very simple Avenger EX. That means that your NP gauge is increased a lot when you get hit, but also allies have a debuff resist reduced by a lot. You've got Oblivion Correction for just passive crit damage up, and Self-Restoration D, which that turns into 3% NP gauge per turn. So again, the fact that her NP gain is already high, she gains a lot of NP on hit, and she passively generates 3% per turn. It's pretty solid. So, role-wise, Kagekiyo is like a lot of Avengers. She's a DPS unit. She's ideal for focusing down bosses. Obviously, first and foremost, if you encounter the Genji trait, which is pretty popular and does include Kagekiyo herself, then you can get up to 200% bonus damage. That'll really shine. That makes fights with Genji-type enemies, which includes characters like Raiko, like Kintoki, obviously, you know, Ushi, Kagekiyo, and stuff like that, Benkei, etc. And several characters that are, at least one who is yet to be added. It's pretty good. But in the chance that that's not that good, you still have a lot of other stuff going on. You have a powerful buff stripping ability, and you can combine that and her NP turn with some pretty gnarly turns of high damage due to star generation and critical damage buffs. Not to mention, while she doesn't have a star absorb buff herself, she makes her allies not star absorb, so you can make that work out pretty good and do a lot of critical damage. Now, for party comp, there's some obvious choices here. First of all, Kagekiyo, being an Avenger, was chaotic evil. Pretty typical. Pairs very well with the recently released Asha Domen. Domen can further amp her attack and critical damage. He can sweep away adds with his AoE NP, and that NP also applies Evil Curse that will really tweak up that damage over time. You know, if you're doubling that curse damage, he does curse damage, she does curse damage, you can chip away at a decent chunk of HP, wiping out adds or possibly even, you know, carving away decent chunks of bosses' HP bars that way. Also, future Foreigner Jaxamole has similar interactions with the evil trait. She can give you invul, she gives further team buffs, and she herself can do bonus damage to cursed enemies, so you can do follow-up damage there. But Kagekiyo is also mostly quick, so you can use units like Scotty to help boost her damage and consistency. Like I said, 10-hit MP. But she does also have a couple of arts cards, and again, pretty good NP gain by default, so you can try some other nonsense. You can use Castoria in here to just give her, you know, generic attack up, make her arts cards work really good. Obviously, you will be having critical turns as follow-up, so you can do that as well. But you might also even try budget units like Paracelsus. Paracelsus can boon her NP gain a lot, and he has a targetable guts, which is important because hers can stack, and that is how you are going to get more grudge stacks on her faster, so you can do even more NP damage. So keep in mind, characters with, like, targetable guts effects are also really good for this. You might beta test this with some Iris Field stuff in the upcoming event, because she can pass out some guts. But Paracelsus is the targetable boy with big NP gain boosts, so it's a fun one to check out. Now, CE selection can be very dependent on what team you build around Kagekiyo, and I do think that Kagekiyo is your build-around unit in this case. She is going to be your centerpiece damage dealer for a boss or something, or a CQ, right? So, you're not just casually busting her out for farming, you're trying to clear some content this way. So, she already has a 20 to 30% battery on herself, you can immediately use a K-Scope, or if you can level up her append skills, you can use a 50% CE. You can use, obviously, the classic Golden Sumo, but even stuff like Summertime Mistress or Holy Night Dinner, those both involve some extra critical damage if you want some big punch-up. Or, if you know you're going to pair her with Battery Servants, you can do the classic Jolter route from back in the day, and ignore starting NP and just go for more critical damage. Hot Spring of the Moon was very popular on Jolter for many years, and also works for Kagekiyo. If you have it, the 3 Angler CE, which is mildly quick-themed in addition to critical and stuff, might be good. And in general, keep an eye on a lot of the Guda Guda adjacent CEs. A lot of these have effects like critical boost up, star gen rate up, NP damage, quick up, etc. In general, I would say quick crit or NP damage won't steer you wrong in this case. You're going to be doing NP turns and then probably following that up with a critical turn if you are using Kagekiyo correctly. You could also try and jam Necromancy for the memes, but understand this is the Gamba strategy. This is not guaranteed success. It's just very funny. Okay, so as an Avenger, Kagekiyo doesn't use gems or anything, or statues, only mats. This has its positives and negatives. Ascensions shouldn't be too hard, you will need some of those new Oni Lantern mats at the end there. Skills, on the other hand, are awful. I say this like roughly 50% of the time it feels like, but they're fucking awful. You're looking at 10 bones, 10 chains, 12 stakes, 10 stand arrows per skill. a lot of mirrors as well at the end. Ugh, it's gross. Like, obviously, like, okay, 30 total bones is not bad compared to some servants, but the fact that it's nothing but mats, there's no freebie here. There's just so many of them stacked together, and you're going to have a bad time. I will also point out, talking about rarity and stuff, Kagekiyo is a pretty rare servant. Her raid up so far is just the little Big Tengu raid up, and then a solo raid up on what should be our New Year's 2024, or roughly thereabouts. Thanksgiving and other stuff exists, with no rerun in sight for Little Big Tengu. I speculated on some Let's Talk FGO episodes that they might do that while waiting for Lost Belt 7 Part 2 to come out. They seem to not be doing that. They're just doing some, low-level event stuff and some catch-up mechanics. Hopefully after that they might, but still, yeah, it's rough. Obviously, with other characters, including like Arjuna Alter and stuff, NA has fixed that somewhat, but don't count on those. She is limited, though, so she will show up in all lucky bags in the future, so you can try and lock in that snipe there. Now, for mechanical bonuses and stuff, Kagekiyo is going to be a bonus servant for Little Big Tengu, obviously, and will also show up as a bonus servant during 15 bespectacled individuals, along with Kichihogen, because technically both of them are genderless. So that's one of those events where we remember the gender debuffs, and we give it to also the genderless servants. Because remember, Kagekiyo is a lot of ghosts, actually. Now, there wasn't any Road to 7 tie-in or anything for Lost Belt 5.5, same with 6.5. So maybe next year we'll do Reminiscent about side chapters and get some side content for Heian and Trom, some, rank ups for anybody who needs them, some banner reruns, we'll see. But since Little Big Tengu, there has been no further Kagekiyo news, doesn't seem to have shown up in any events or anything. Maybe get like a handful in like a Guda Guda or something, but I didn't see any notes of them being counted as a bonus servant. So we'll see. We continue to wait in silence and to hear more of Yoshitsune's lesbian adventures. If you don't get that, read some profiles. All right, that's it. That's all I got. I'm outie 5,000. Remember, Genji must die, everybody. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like on YouTube. Drop a comment in that comment section down below. Let us know how you're doing on that banner. You can also join our Discord, link in the video description and on our channel page, where we have a roll thread where you can post pictures of your rolls to the internet to show people. You can also subscribe to this channel to get more Wanted and our podcast, Let's Talk FGO. It's about FGO. It's every week. Check it out. And also get other cool content. Make sure to also ring that bell for notifications, even if you're already subscribed, so you always know we post this video. And you can also consider dropping us a channel membership, get access to membership badges and emotes, help support the channel, keep the videos rolling. And like I said at the front of the show, consider supporting us at Patreon. Could have gotten this video early. Get access to audio recordings of the podcast, lots of other fun goodies, and it also really helps us out and supports us. And that is the outro rigmarole. So I'll be seeing you guys next time. Good night, everybody. Or good day. Yeah.